The medical station floated in the darkness of space like a massive steel flower. Inside, doctors from 100 different worlds worked to save lives. The Galactic Medical Station was the best facility in known space. If someone could not be saved here, they could not be saved anywhere. In room 847, a young elven girl lay dying. Her name was Lyria, and she was a princess of the Sylvani Empire. Her people lived for thousands of years and commanded magic that could reshape reality itself. They were beautiful, powerful, and ancient beyond human understanding. But none of that mattered now. Lyria was turning to stone. The disease had a long medical name that no one could pronounce. It caused her organs to slowly crystallize from the inside out. Her lungs struggled with each breath. Her heart beat irregularly, fighting against the stone that wrapped around it like cruel fingers. She had weeks at most, maybe only days. Beside her bed, a small dragon watched with worried golden eyes. Ember was not like the great war dragons of legend. She was no bigger than a large dog with copper-colored scales that shimmered in the medical lights. Smoke curled from her nostrils with each anxious breath. The dragon had not left Lyria's side in 3 weeks. She would not eat. She barely slept. When doctors tried to approach, Ember would bare her teeth and hiss flame. The bond between Sylvani and their dragons was absolute. When one died, the other followed within hours. Everyone in the medical station knew this. When Lyria passed, Ember would die too. 6 different doctors stood outside the room. They represented the finest medical minds in the galaxy. There was Dr. Krex, a Krathani with 6 arms and compound eyes that could see into the cellular level. Dr. Mira, an Orvaxian whose consciousness was actually 7 minds working as one. Dr. Zeph, a crystalline being who understood mineral formations better than anyone. And 3 others, each a master of their field. They all agreed on one thing. There was nothing more they could do. The door to the medical wing opened with a soft hiss. Queen Valendra entered, followed by a dozen elven warriors in silver armor. The queen moved like water, graceful and cold. Her face showed no emotion, but her eyes betrayed her. She was terrified. Dr. Krex bowed low. His 6 arms crossed over his thorax in a gesture of respect and sorrow. The queen spoke in a voice like ice. She wanted to know what could be done. She demanded experimental treatments. She offered unlimited resources. Her daughter was the heir to an empire that spanned 300 star systems. Surely something could be done. The doctors looked at each other. Dr. Mira stepped forward, all 7 of her consciousness speaking in perfect harmony. The crystallization had reached the heart. Any surgery would kill Lyria faster than the disease. Any known treatment was too aggressive for her weakened state. The kindest thing now was to make her comfortable, to let her pass with dignity. Queen Valendra did not cry. Elven royalty did not cry in public, but something in her face cracked just for a moment. She asked how long. Dr. Krex estimated 3 days, maybe 4. The queen nodded slowly. She would stay. She would be with her daughter at the end. It was the only thing left she could do. Down the hallway, past the intensive care wing, a human woman was arguing with a supply clerk. Kate Morrison was tired. She had been awake for 20 hours, coordinating the delivery of supplies for refugee children on the lower levels of the station. She was 47 years old, with brown hair that refused to stay in its ponytail, and eyes that had seen too much sadness. She worked for Earth Foster Services, a small organization that helped displaced children across human space. The supply clerk insisted that Kate needed more forms, more signatures, more authorization codes. Kate wanted to reach across the counter and shake him. She settled for taking a deep breath instead. She had learned long ago that yelling never helped. Persistence helped. Patience helped. Stubbornness helped most of all. While she argued, Kate noticed a commotion near the intensive care wing. Doctors were leaving a room, their faces grim. A tall, elegant woman in flowing robes stood speaking with them. Even from a distance, Kate could tell something terrible was happening. She had developed an instinct for tragedy over the years. Too many children, too many hopeless situations, too many times being told there was nothing to be done. Kate excused herself from the supply counter and walked toward the intensive care wing. She knew she had no business there. She was not medical staff. She was not family. But something pulled her forward anyway. She arrived just in time to hear Dr. Krex say the words, "There's nothing more we can do." Kate stopped walking. She had heard those words before. She had heard them about Danny, the boy with the heart defect who now ran marathons. She had heard them about Lisa, the girl told she would never walk who now taught dance. She had heard those words dozens of times, and she had learned to hate them. She peered through the window of room 847. A young girl lay in the bed. She looked maybe 12 years old by human standards, though Kate knew elven aging was different. Her skin had a grayish tint, and even through the window Kate could see her struggling to breathe. Beside the bed, a small dragon curled protectively around her. Kate felt something twist in her chest. That was a child in there. A scared, dying child. She turned to the doctors. She asked what was being done for the girl. The doctors looked at her with surprise. Dr. Mira explained patiently that this was a private case. Kate was not authorized to be here. The patient was receiving the best care possible. Kate looked at the girl again, then back at the doctors. Then why are you all out here instead of in there helping her? The question hung in the air. Queen Valendra turned to look at Kate for the first time. Her eyes were cold and assessing. Who was this human to question the finest doctors in the galaxy? Dr. Krex explained with barely concealed irritation. The patient had a rare genetic disorder. Her organs were crystallizing. The condition was terminal. They had tried everything within the bounds of medical ethics and galactic law. Sometimes even the best doctors had to admit defeat. Kate felt anger rising in her throat. She had heard this speech before, too. The careful words, the professional distance, the way doctors prepared families to accept death as inevitable. She asked if they had tried human medicine. The hallway went silent. Several doctors actually laughed. One of the Orvaxian consciousness made a sound like a snort. Dr. Zeph's crystalline body chimed with what might have been amusement. Human medicine was primitive by galactic standards. Humans had only been in space for 200 years. Their medical technology was thousands of years behind most species. The idea that human medicine could succeed where the finest alien doctors had failed was absurd, but Kate was not laughing. She pulled out her communication device and made a call. She contacted Dr. Helen Cruz, a researcher friend back on Earth. She asked about a nanotreatment being developed for calcification diseases. Helen confirmed it existed. The treatment used microscopic machines to break down calcium and mineral deposits in living tissue. It was still experimental. It had never been tested on alien biology. The success rate on humans was only 60%. The procedure was agonizing and took many hours. Kate looked at the dying girl through the window. She looked at the small dragon that would die with her. She thought about all the times she had been told a case was hopeless. All the times she had refused to accept it. She told Helen to come to the medical station. Bring the treatment. Bring everything. Queen Valendra stepped forward, her face a mask of controlled fury. She would not allow her daughter to be experimented on by primitive humans. The girl would die with dignity, not as a test subject for untested procedures. Kate met the Queen's eyes without flinching. She asked if letting a child die without trying everything possible was truly dignified. The Queen's hand moved to the weapon at her side. Her guards tensed. For a moment, it seemed violence might erupt in the medical hallway. Then Kate did something that shocked everyone. She accessed her communication device again and filed an official form with the Galactic Tribunal. It was an emergency foster custody claim under child protection laws. If a legal guardian was refusing potentially life-saving treatment, any galactic citizen could file for temporary protective custody. It was a law almost never used. It was designed to protect children from abusive or neglectful parents. Using it against a queen for a princess was unprecedented, but the law was clear. Once filed, the claim had to be reviewed. The child could not be moved or treated until a ruling was made. Kate had just frozen everything in place. Queen Valendra stared at Kate with an expression of pure hatred. She promised that if this human dared to continue, there would be consequences. The Sylvani Empire would not forget this insult. Kate understood. She had probably just started a diplomatic incident that could lead to war. But when she looked through that window at the dying child, she found she did not care about diplomacy. A tribunal judge would arrive within 48 hours to hear the case. Until then, Lyria remained in medical stasis. Kate had bought time. Now she just had to figure out how to save a life. 36 hours remained until the tribunal hearing when Dr. Helen Cruz arrived at the medical station. She brought 3 other human doctors and 6 cases of equipment that looked ancient compared to the sleek alien technology surrounding them. Kate met them at the docking bay. Helen looked exhausted from the emergency flight. Her gray hair was pulled back in a messy bun and her eyes were red from lack of sleep. But she smiled when she saw Kate. The two women embraced quickly before getting to business. Helen explained the procedure as they walked through the corridors. The nanomachines would be injected directly into the bloodstream. They would travel through the body, finding crystallized tissue and breaking it down molecule by molecule. The process would take between 10 and 15 hours. Kate asked about the risks. Helen did not sugarcoat it. The patient would experience extreme pain throughout the procedure. Sedation was not possible because the patient needed to remain conscious. The nanomachines required the body to not fight them, which meant the patient had to somehow suppress their own immune response. For humans, this meant meditation and focus training before the procedure. For an alien species with magical abilities, Helen had no idea if it would even work. There was also the crystallization around the heart. If the nanomachines worked too quickly, they could destabilize the heart rhythm. If they worked too slowly, the patient might die before the procedure finished. The timing had to be perfect. Kate asked what the success rate was. 60%, Helen said quietly. On humans. We have no data on elven physiology. They reached the human medical section of the station. It was much smaller than the main facility, tucked into a corner that most aliens never visited. The equipment was older. The rooms were plain, but it was clean and the staff was dedicated. Lyria had been moved there under tribunal order. Queen Valendra had protested violently, but the law was clear. Until the custody hearing concluded, the child remained in neutral territory under galactic protection. Kate approached room 12 with her heart pounding. She had won the legal battle to try. Now came the hard part. She actually had to save Lyria's life. Through the window, she could see the young elven girl lying in bed. Lyria looked even weaker than before. Her skin had taken on a gray, stone-like quality. Each breath seemed to take enormous effort. Ember, the small dragon, lay on the bed beside her. The creature's golden eyes were dull. Smoke barely curled from her nostrils. The dragon was fading along with her bonded companion. Kate opened the door slowly. Immediately, Ember's head snapped up. The dragon's eyes blazed with sudden fire. A low growl rumbled in her throat. Small flames danced between her teeth. Kate stopped moving. She had dealt with frightened animals before. Rushing forward would only make things worse. Instead, she did something unexpected. She sat down on the floor right there in the doorway. She did not look at Ember. She did not try to approach. She just sat. Helen and the other doctors watched with confusion. They needed to prepare the patient. They needed to run tests. They needed to start the procedure as soon as possible. But Kate held up one hand, signaling them to wait. She understood something the doctors did not. Ember was not just protecting Lyria. The dragon was terrified. She had watched alien doctors poke and prod her bonded companion for weeks. She had seen them all give up. Now more strangers wanted to do more painful things. Kate started talking. Her voice was soft and steady. She told Ember about Earth. She described forests and oceans. She talked about other children she had helped. She explained that she knew Ember was scared, that she understood the dragon did not trust any of them. An hour passed. Kate kept talking. Her legs went numb from sitting on the hard floor. Her back ached, but she did not move. Slowly, Ember's growling stopped. The flames between her teeth died down. The dragon watched Kate with suspicious but curious eyes. Kate talked about a dog she had once, a rescue animal that had been abused. The dog had not trusted anyone for months, but patience and consistency had won out. Eventually, the dog had learned that not all humans were cruel. Another hour passed. The doctors were getting anxious. They needed to start soon, but Kate waved them back again. Then something remarkable happened. Ember stood up. The small dragon climbed down from the bed and slowly approached Kate. Each step was cautious, ready to bolt at any moment. Kate remained perfectly still. She kept talking in that same calm voice. Ember sniffed Kate's outstretched hand. Then, to everyone's shock, the dragon climbed into Kate's lap. The creature was heavier than she looked and radiating heat like a furnace. But Kate wrapped her arms around the dragon gently. Ember curled up against Kate's chest. For the first time in weeks, the dragon relaxed. A soft purring sound came from deep in her throat. Kate felt something strange then. A tickle at the edge of her mind. Emotions that were not her own. Fear, exhaustion, desperate hope. She was feeling what Ember felt. Helen knelt beside Kate and whispered. Dragons bonded to their companions through a psychic link. By calming the dragon, Kate had opened herself to that link. It was temporary and weak, but it was there. Kate looked past Ember to the bed where Lyria lay. The girl's eyes were open now, watching with wonder. She had seen her dragon, who trusted no one but her, choose to trust this strange human woman. Kate spoke gently to Lyria. She explained what they wanted to do. She did not lie about the pain or the risks. She told Lyria that the procedure might not work, but they had to try. Lyria's voice was barely a whisper. She asked why. Why would strangers risk so much for her? Why would this human woman anger her mother and face down an empire? Kate smiled sadly. She said that was what mothers do. They fight for their children even when the odds are impossible. Lyria started to cry, not delicate tears but real sobbing. She said her own mother had given up on her. She said she was ready to die. She was so tired of fighting. Kate stood up, still holding Ember, and moved to the bedside. She looked Lyria directly in the eyes. Kate said she understood being tired. She understood wanting the pain to stop. But giving up was not the same as finding peace. Giving up meant letting fear win. Lyria was stronger than she knew. The young elf looked doubtful. She said she was weak. She was broken. She was not strong. Kate shook her head. She said strength was not about physical power. Strength was getting up every day even when everything hurt. Strength was holding on when letting go seemed easier. Lyria had been fighting this disease for years. That was the strongest thing Kate had ever seen. Something shifted in Lyria's expression. A tiny spark of determination flickered in her eyes. Helen explained the procedure again, this time directly to Lyria. The girl would need to stay awake the entire time. She would need to use her magical abilities to keep her immune system from attacking the nanomachines. Most importantly, she would need something to anchor her through the pain. Something to hold on to when every nerve in her body screamed. Kate volunteered immediately. She would stay with Lyria through the entire procedure. However long it took, Helen warned her it could be 12 hours or more. Kate would have to keep Lyria conscious and fighting. If the girl passed out or gave up, she would die. Kate said she understood. She had sat beside dying children before. She knew how to be an anchor. The medical team prepared the equipment. They ran final tests on Lyria's vitals. They mixed the nanomachine solution carefully, adjusting it based on their best guess of elven biology. As midnight approached, they were ready to begin. Kate pulled a chair beside Lyria's bed. She took the girl's hand in hers. On her other side, Ember pressed close, the dragon's warmth spreading through both of them. Helen inserted the IV line. The nanomachines began flowing into Lyria's bloodstream. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. Then Lyria gasped. Her back arched off the bed. Her hand crushed Kate's with inhuman strength. The pain had begun. Lyria screamed. It was a sound of pure agony that echoed through the medical wing. The monitors showed her heart rate spiking dangerously. Her magical energy flared wildly, threatening to destroy the nanomachines. Helen moved to sedate her, but Kate stopped her. Sedation would end the procedure and kill Lyria. They had to push through. Kate leaned close to Lyria's ear and started talking. She told stories. She described Earth in vivid detail. She talked about children she had helped who had survived impossible odds. Hours crawled by. Lyria convulsed and screamed. Kate's hand went numb from the girl's grip. Sweat poured down both their faces. Around hour 5, Lyria began to weaken. Her screams turned to whimpers. Her grip loosened. The monitors showed her vitals dropping. Kate talked faster, more urgently. She told Lyria about a boy named Danny, who had been born with a hole in his heart. Doctors said he would never run. But Danny refused to accept that. He fought through surgeries and therapy. Now he ran marathons. Lyria's eyes started to close. Kate shook her. She said Lyria did not get to quit, not now. Not after they had come this far. But Lyria was fading. The pain was too much. Her young body could not take any more. Kate did something desperate. She pressed her forehead against Lyria's. She poured every ounce of her will into that contact. She whispered fiercely, "Not yet, you do not leave yet. I did not fight your mother and challenge an empire just to watch you give up on me now." Something happened. Kate felt a jolt like electricity between them. The custody hearing took place in the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Tribunal, 3 days after Lyria's successful treatment. The room was massive, with seats rising in tiers around a central floor. Holographic displays floated in the air, translating proceedings into hundreds of languages simultaneously. Kate sat at a small table with her lawyer, Beth Cooper. Beth was young for a galactic attorney, only 15 years out of law school. She specialized in interspecies family cases, though she had never handled anything remotely this important before. Her hands shook slightly as she organized her digital files. Across the chamber, Queen Valendra sat with 12 elven legal scholars. Each one wore flowing robes and carried the weight of centuries of legal experience. They looked at Kate and Beth with barely concealed contempt. The gallery was packed. News organizations from 50 different worlds had sent representatives. This case had become the most watched legal proceeding in recent galactic history. Protesters gathered outside the tribunal building, both for and against Kate's actions. 3 judges presided over the hearing. Judge Morath was a towering Krell with gray skin and 4 eyes. Judge Lynn was human, a stern woman from the Mars colonies. Judge Vex was a floating energy being from the Lumina system, existing as a ball of light and consciousness. Judge Morath called the chamber to order. His voice boomed through the space without need for amplification. The prosecution began their case. The lead elven scholar, a male named Aldrich who looked ancient beyond counting, approached the central floor. He spoke in a voice like silk over steel. He argued that Kate had exploited a loophole in poorly written laws. The emergency custody statute was designed to protect children from abusive parents, not to override the rightful authority of a queen. Kate had no understanding of Sylvani culture or biology. She had subjected a royal heir to experimental torture based on primitive human medicine. That the treatment succeeded was mere luck, not wisdom. Aldrich displayed holographic images of Lyria screaming during the procedure. He played audio of her cries of pain. He made it seem like Kate had inflicted cruelty rather than offering hope. He continued his argument. Kate was human. Humans lived barely a century. How could someone so short-lived be trusted to raise an elven child who would live for thousands of years? Kate knew nothing of elven magic, politics, or tradition. She could not teach Lyria the skills needed to rule an empire. Most damning, Aldrich argued, was that Lyria's statement about staying with Kate had been made while the girl was drugged and traumatized. She had been in pain, confused, and not thinking clearly. No child's statement made under such conditions could be considered valid consent. The other elven scholars presented their arguments. They cited thousand-year-old legal precedents. They referenced treaties and cultural agreements. They painted Kate as an ignorant human who had caused a diplomatic crisis out of misguided sentimentality. When they finished, Kate felt sick to her stomach. Beth looked pale. The case they had prepared seemed weak compared to the centuries of elven legal tradition being thrown at them. Then Beth stood to present their defense. Her voice wavered at first but grew stronger. She argued that parental authority was not absolute in galactic law. When a guardian refused treatment that could save a child's life, the state had a duty to intervene. Kate had not exploited a loophole. She had used the law exactly as it was intended. Beth displayed medical records showing that every alien doctor had declared Lyria's case hopeless. Queen Valendra herself had agreed to let her daughter die. Kate had been the only person willing to try to save the girl's life. As for understanding Sylvani culture, Beth argued that love and dedication transcended cultural boundaries. Kate had proven her commitment by staying with Lyria through 12 hours of agonizing treatment. She had formed a psychic bond with Lyria's dragon, something unprecedented in galactic history. Beth's arguments were logical and well presented, but Kate could see they were not enough. The judges looked unconvinced. The weight of elven legal tradition was too much for a young human lawyer to overcome. Then something unexpected happened. The chamber doors opened. Ember walked in. Dragons were not recognized as legal entities. They were considered bonded animals, extensions of their Sylvani companions. Ember had no legal right to be in the tribunal chamber, but the small dragon walked past the elven scholars with her head held high. She passed Queen Valendra without a glance. She crossed the floor and sat directly at Kate's feet. The dragon placed her copper-scaled head in Kate's lap and looked up at the judges. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. Holographic cameras zoomed in. Translators struggled to convey the significance of what had just occurred. In Sylvani culture, a dragon's choice was sacred. Dragons could not be commanded or forced. They bonded with their companions through mutual recognition of souls. For Ember to publicly choose Kate's presence over the Queen's was unprecedented. Queen Valendra stood slowly. Her face was a mask of controlled rage, but underneath Kate could see heartbreak. The Queen spoke in a voice that carried through the chamber without shouting. She said that if the tribunal granted Kate custody, the Sylvani Empire would consider it an act of war against their sovereignty. She would recall all elven ambassadors from human worlds. She would close Sylvani space to human ships. Trade agreements that had stood for a century would be dissolved. The threat hung in the air like a blade. Judge Morath called for a recess so the judges could deliberate. The wait would be at least 2 hours. Kate was escorted to a small holding room. Beth came with her, looking devastated. The lawyer said she was sorry. She had done her best, but it was not enough. The threat of war changed everything. The tribunal would not risk galactic stability for one child. Kate sat in silence for a long moment. Then she asked to see Lyria. Security escorted her to another holding room where Lyria waited with medical staff. The girl looked so much healthier than 3 days ago. Color had returned to her skin. She moved with a grace that had been missing before. She was going to live a long, full life, just not with Kate. Lyria ran to Kate when she entered. The girl threw her arms around Kate's waist and held on tight. Ember followed, pressing against both of them. Kate knelt down so she was eye level with Lyria. She had to tell the girl what was about to happen. They were going to lose. But before Kate could speak, Lyria said she already knew. She had heard the Queen's threat. She understood what it meant. The young elf's eyes were wet with tears, but her voice was steady. She thanked Kate for everything. She said she would never forget the human who had refused to let her die. She understood if Kate had to let her go. Starting a war over one girl was not right. Kate felt something break inside her chest. She pulled Lyria into a tight hug. She said she wanted to tell Lyria something important, something about humans that the elven scholars did not understand. Kate said humans were really stupid about some things. They fought wars over the dumbest reasons. They made terrible decisions and never learned from their mistakes. But they also had this defect in their programming, this glitch in their nature. They could not leave kids behind. It was just not in them. They would fight impossible battles and face terrible odds for the sake of a single child. So yes, maybe they would start a war. It would not be humanity's first. But Lyria was worth it. Lyria began crying for real then. Not delicate elven tears, but messy human-style sobbing. She collapsed against Kate and cried into her shoulder. All the fear and pain and exhaustion of the past weeks poured out. Ember wrapped around both of them, forming a protective circle of scales and warmth. The dragon's purring vibrated through them. Kate held Lyria and let her cry. She stroked the girl's hair and whispered that everything would be okay. She did not know if that was true. But it was what mothers said. After a long while, security came to take them back to the chamber. The judges had reached their decision. Kate walked back into the tribunal with her heart pounding. She held Lyria's hand on one side. Ember walked on the other. Beth stood waiting at their table, her face unreadable. The 3 judges took their positions. Judge Morath spoke first. He said this case had presented unprecedented challenges. It touched on questions of sovereignty, cultural rights, medical ethics, and the welfare of children. The judges had reviewed centuries of legal precedent. They had consulted with experts in interspecies law. Kate barely breathed. Judge Morath continued. The tribunal recognized Queen Valendra's concerns about sovereignty and cultural preservation. They acknowledged the validity of elven legal traditions. However, they also recognized that galactic law placed the welfare of children above political considerations. Therefore, the judges ruled as follows. Kate would be granted temporary guardianship of Lyria for 1 galactic year. During this time, Lyria would receive regular cultural instruction from approved Sylvani tutors. She would maintain contact with her mother and the elven court. Kate would need to prove she could provide adequate care for a Sylvani child. At the end of 1 year, Lyria would be given a choice. If she chose to remain with Kate, the guardianship would become permanent. If she chose to return to her mother, Kate would have no further legal claim. Judge Lynn added a final note. The tribunal hoped this compromise would satisfy both parties and prevent conflict. 3 months passed since the tribunal ruling. Kate had converted her small apartment on New Terra Station into a home for Lyria and Ember. It was chaotic in ways she had never experienced before. The furniture bore deep scratches from dragon claws. Burn marks decorated the ceiling from when Ember had nightmares and breathed fire in her sleep. The walls were covered with drawings Lyria made, mixing elven symbols with human art. The kitchen always smelled of the special herbs Lyria needed in her diet, mixed with the scent of whatever human food Kate was teaching her to make. Kate woke each morning to find Ember curled at the foot of her bed, radiating warmth like a living furnace. Lyria usually slept in her own room, but often wandered in during the night, climbing into bed between Kate and the dragon when bad dreams struck. The nightmares came frequently. Lyria dreamed of turning to stone, of her heart stopping, of the pain from the treatment. She would wake screaming, and Kate would hold her until the shaking stopped. Ember would press close, purring in that deep rumbling way that seemed to calm them both. Daily life was a constant challenge. Master Riven, the Sylvani cultural tutor assigned by the tribunal, arrived 3 times a week. He was ancient even by elven standards, with silver hair that reached the floor and eyes that held centuries of disapproval. He criticized everything Kate did. Human food was too crude for an elven princess. Human furniture was uncomfortable. Human entertainment was mindless noise. Kate was teaching Lyria terrible habits like laughing loudly and running in the halls. The girl was falling behind in her magical studies. She would never be fit to rule if she continued living like a human child. Kate tried to be patient with Master Riven. She understood he was trying to preserve Lyria's connection to her culture. But some days his constant criticism made her want to throw him out the airlock. Lyria struggled with her magical training. The illness had stolen years when she should have been developing her abilities. Other elven children her age could already manipulate energy, create light, and communicate telepathically. Lyria could barely manage a small spark. Master Riven said she was hopeless. He said the human environment was stifling her natural talents. He reported to the tribunal every week that Kate was failing to provide adequate cultural education. But there were good moments too. Kate taught Lyria to cook human food. They made pancakes on Sunday mornings, getting flour everywhere and laughing at the mess. Lyria discovered she loved chocolate, eating it until she made herself sick the first time. She learned to tie her own shoes, something elven children never needed to do because they wore slip-on footwear. Ember learned to play fetch with small asteroids in the protected flight zone outside the station. The dragon would zoom through space, chasing the rocks Kate threw using a magnetic launcher. Other residents would stop and watch, amazed by the sight of a small copper dragon playing like a puppy. Lyria made her first human friend, a girl named Maya who lived 3 doors down. Maya was 9 years old and did not care that Lyria was an elven princess. She taught Lyria games and introduced her to human music and movies. They spent hours playing together while their parents watched with cautious approval. One evening, Kate found Lyria laughing at a comedy show on the view screen. Really laughing, the kind that made her gasp for breath and hold her stomach. Kate realized it was the first time she had heard Lyria laugh like that. Not a polite elven chuckle, but pure childish joy. When Lyria noticed Kate watching, she said something that made Kate's heart ache. She said she had never been allowed to laugh like this at the palace. It was not dignified for royalty. Kate sat beside her and said that laughter was one of the best things about being alive. Anyone who said otherwise was wrong, but outside their small apartment, the galaxy was falling apart. The political situation had deteriorated badly. Queen Valendra had kept her promise. All Sylvani ambassadors had been recalled from human worlds. Elven space was closed to human ships. Trade agreements worth billions had been dissolved overnight. 2 other alien species, the Crithani and the Vexer, had formed an alliance with the Sylvani Empire. They saw an opportunity to gain leverage against humanity, which had been expanding aggressively through space for decades. Together, the 3 species controlled nearly a third of known space. Border skirmishes had already begun. Human patrol ships reported being fired upon when they strayed too close to Sylvani territory. A human cargo vessel had been seized, its crew imprisoned for violating the closed borders. The Crithani had begun raiding human colonies on the frontier. News reports showed protests on dozens of worlds. Some humans blamed Kate for endangering the peace. They said one child was not worth risking millions of lives. Others defended her, saying humanity stood for protecting children no matter the cost. Sylvani citizens were equally divided. Some supported their queen's hard line. Others questioned whether severing all contact with humanity was truly wise. There were even rumors of dissent within the elven court itself. Kate received messages every day. Some were supportive, praising her courage, but many were hateful. People called her a warmonger, a fool, a woman too stupid to understand the consequences of her actions. Some threatened violence against her and Lyria. Security had to be posted outside their apartment. Armed guards escorted them whenever they left. Lyria could no longer play in the public areas of the station. It was too dangerous. One night after Lyria had gone to bed, Dr. Helen Cruz visited Kate. They sat in the small living area with cups of coffee, speaking in low voices so they would not wake the girl. Helen looked worried. She said Lyria's recovery was going well, but the stress of the situation was taking a toll. Any major trauma could trigger a relapse. The crystallization might return. Lyria needed stability, peace, and routine. She needed exactly what Kate could not provide in the middle of an interstellar crisis. Kate knew Helen was right. She had seen the signs herself. Lyria was having more nightmares. She was losing weight. Sometimes she would touch her chest, fear flickering across her face, as if checking to make sure her heart was still beating normally. Helen asked gently if Kate had considered the possibility that returning Lyria to her mother might be the kindest option. For the girl's health, if nothing else. Kate sat in silence for a long time. She thought about Lyria's laughter. She thought about how the girl had started calling her mom. She thought about Ember curled on her bed, trusting her completely. Then she thought about Queen Valendra's cold face. About a palace where laughter was forbidden. About a culture that had been ready to let Lyria die rather than try something new. Kate said she needed to talk to the queen. Face to face. No lawyers, no tribunal, no political theater. Just two mothers discussing what was best for their daughter. Helen said that was impossible. Valendra had refused all communication with Kate. She would never agree to meet. But Kate had one advantage. She knew the old emergency channel codes from when the custody case began. She sent a message directly to the Queen using those codes. She said she was willing to return Lyria to prevent the war, but only if they could meet and talk first. To Kate's surprise, Valendra agreed. They chose a neutral location, an abandoned space station on the border between human and Sylvani space. The station had once been a joint research facility, a symbol of cooperation between their peoples. Now it was a ghost, left to decay when relations had soured years. Before the custody battle even began, Kate brought only Lyria and Ember. Valendra came with 2 guards but insisted on meeting alone. Except for them, the abandoned station was eerie. Lights flickered. Corridors were dark and cold. Equipment sat untouched, gathering dust. It felt like walking through the corpse of a better time. They met in what had once been a conference room. Valendra stood on one side, regal and cold in her flowing robes. Kate stood on the other, wearing simple human clothing that seemed shabby in comparison. Lyria stood between them, uncertain and afraid. The moment stretched out. 2 women who had become enemies, both claiming to love the same child. Then Lyria ran to her mother. Kate's heart broke a little, but she understood. Lyria loved her mother. She had always loved her mother. The girl threw her arms around Valendra's waist, crying. For just a moment, Valendra's cold mask cracked. She embraced her daughter, her face showing raw pain and longing. She stroked Lyria's hair with a gentleness Kate had never seen from her before. But when Valendra spoke, her voice was hard again. She said Lyria had been selfish. Thousands could die because she chose her own comfort over duty. She needed to return home, marry the prince chosen for her, produce heirs and accept her role. Even if it meant pain, even if it meant giving up everything she had found with Kate. Lyria's face crumbled with confusion and hurt. Kate started to speak, to defend Lyria, to argue. Then alarms began screaming throughout the station. Ships were approaching. Many ships. But they were not Sylvani or human vessels. They were Crithani warships, the spider-like species that had allied with Valendra. Their commander's voice boomed through the station's communication system. The war had weakened both human and Sylvani forces. The Crithani would take advantage. They would claim disputed territories from both sides, and they would start by capturing the abandoned station and everyone in it. The station was directly in their firing path. Weapons locked on. The abandoned station shook as Krithani weapons fire struck the outer hull. Warning lights flashed red throughout the corridors. Computer systems that had been dormant for years suddenly activated, screaming alerts about structural failure and oxygen leaks. Kate knelt beside Lyria, checking her pulse. The girl was unconscious, her breathing shallow. Her skin had taken on that terrible gray tint again, the first sign of crystallization returning. The stress had been too much. Queen Valendra knelt on the other side, her hands hovering over her daughter but not quite touching. For the first time since Kate had met her, the queen looked uncertain, afraid. Kate said they needed to stabilize Lyria before they could move her, but the station was falling apart around them. They had maybe 2 hours before complete structural collapse. Valendra's 2 guards burst into the room. They said the Krithani were boarding the station from multiple points. Their commander had made his intentions clear over the communication channels. They wanted Lyria alive, a Sylvani princess who had been successfully treated with human nanotechnology was an invaluable prize. They would study her, replicate the treatment, perhaps even weaponize it. One guard tried to lift Lyria. Kate stopped him. Moving her in this condition could kill her faster than the Krithani. Valendra ordered her guards to hold the corridor while she and Kate worked to stabilize Lyria. The 2 elven warriors looked shocked at the idea of leaving their queen, but they obeyed. They took positions at the doorway, weapons ready. Kate pulled emergency medical supplies from her bag. She always carried them now. Terrified of exactly this kind of situation, she administered a stabilizer shot that Helen had prepared for emergencies. It would not cure Lyria, but it might keep her alive long enough to get her to safety. Valendra watched Kate work. Then quietly she began using her own magic. Elven healing magic was different from human medicine. It worked with the body's natural energy rather than chemicals and machines. Green light flowed from Valendra's hands into Lyria's chest. Kate saw Lyria's breathing ease slightly. The gray tint faded just a little. Valendra admitted something she had never said aloud before. She had suggested the doctors give up on Lyria not out of wisdom, but fear. She could not bear watching her daughter suffer through endless failed treatments. She thought letting her die peacefully was mercy. Kate's refusal to accept that had made Valendra feel like a coward. She had hated Kate for it. Kate said she understood. She had been terrified too. She still was. But fear could not be allowed to make decisions for them. Not when a child's life hung in the balance. Another explosion rocked the station, closer this time. The sounds of weapons fire echoed through the corridors. Valendra's guards were fighting. Buying time. Ember paced near the doorway, smoke pouring from her nostrils. The small dragon wanted to fight to protect her bonded companion. But she was torn between staying with Lyria and defending against the threat. Kate called Ember over. She placed her hand on the dragon's copper scales. Through their bond, she felt Ember's conflict. The dragon was small, barely the size of a large dog. What could she do against armored Krithani soldiers and warships? But Kate remembered something from the dragon lore Master Riven had taught Lyria. Dragons bonded to Sylvani could temporarily absorb their partner's life force to become larger and stronger. It required absolute trust and a willingness to sacrifice. She asked Valendra if it was true. The queen nodded slowly. In ancient times, Sylvani warriors would bond with their dragons for battle, lending their power. But it was dangerous. If the dragon drew too much, both would die. It required perfect trust between dragon and rider. Kate looked at Ember, then at Lyria lying unconscious, then at Valendra. She said they all trusted Ember, all 3 of them. What if they all lent their strength? Valendra looked shocked. Such a thing had never been done. Dragons bonded with one Sylvani, never more. The magic was not designed for multiple sources. Kate pointed out that Ember had already bonded partially with her during Lyria's treatment. The connection existed. They had felt it. What if they made it stronger? What if all 3 of them gave Ember what she needed? The station shook again. One of Valendra's guards fell back into the room, wounded. Krithani soldiers were breaking through. They had minutes at most. Valendra made a decision that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. She would try. She would bond with her daughter's dragon, and share that bond with a human. For an elven queen, it was beyond unprecedented. It was almost heretical, but she would do it to save Lyria. The queen placed one hand on Ember. Kate placed her other hand on the dragon's opposite side. Lyria lay between them, still unconscious, but somehow part of the connection. Valendra began chanting in the ancient elven language. Kate did not understand the words, but she felt their power. Magic flowed from the queen into Ember, golden and bright. Kate had no magic, but she had something else. That stubborn human refusal to give up. That determination that had kept Lyria alive through the treatment. She poured that into Ember through their bond. Not magic, but will made manifest. And Lyria, even unconscious, responded. Her own magic, weak but present, joined the flow. 3 sources of power merged in Ember. Sylvani, magic from Lyria. Human determination from Kate. Royal, authority and ancient power from Valendra. Ember began to change. The small dragon grew. Her copper scales blazed like molten metal. Her wings spread wider, filling the room. Her body stretched and expanded until she was no longer the size of a dog, but the size of a shuttlecraft. Power radiated from her in visible waves. The remaining guards stared in awe and terror. Ember roared. The sound shook the entire station. Then the dragon charged through the doorway, too large to fit properly, tearing through the walls as she went. Crithani soldiers in the corridor did not stand a chance. Ember tore through them with claws and flame. Her tail smashed through walls. Her fire turned their armor to slag. She was a force of nature unleashed. The dragon did not stop at the corridor. She burst through the outer hull of the station and flew into space, unprotected by any ship or suit, sustained purely by the magic and will flowing through her bond. Through the bond, Kate could feel what Ember felt. The cold of space, the exhilaration of flight, the fierce joy of protecting her family. Ember attacked the Crithani flagship directly. She tore through its shields with claws that burned hotter than stars. She breathed fire that melted hull plating. A single dragon empowered by the bond between human, elf, and child, fighting an entire fleet. The Crithani ships tried to target her, but Ember was too fast, too fierce. She darted between vessels, causing chaos and destruction. Her roar echoed across communication channels, a sound of primal fury. The Crithani commander broadcast a retreat order. They had not anticipated this. They had expected an easy capture of a dying station. Instead, they faced something from ancient legends. A war dragon in full fury. The fleet withdrew, limping back toward their own territory. But the effort had cost Ember dearly. Kate felt it through the bond. The dragon had burned too bright. She was dying. Ember flew back to the station, shrinking with each moment. By the time she reached the room where Kate and Valendra waited, she was her normal size again. She collapsed on the floor, her breathing labored. Her scales had lost their luster. Through the bond, Kate felt Lyria dying too. Dragon and rider were linked. When one died, so did the other. That was the ancient law of the bond. Kate refused to accept it. She had not come this far, fought this hard to lose Lyria and Ember now. She looked at Valendra. The queen understood without words being spoken. Kate said there might be a way. During the fight, 3 of them had been linked to Ember. What if they made that connection permanent? Instead of Ember bonded to only Lyria, what if the dragon bonded to all 3 of them? They could share the burden of the bond. Distribute the life force between 3 people instead of 1. Valendra understood immediately. It would mean giving up part of her essence. Living in constant connection not just to the dragon, but to Kate and Lyria, feeling their emotions, their thoughts, their presence always in the back of her mind. For an elven queen who valued control and distance, it was unthinkable. She did it anyway. Using ancient Sylvani magic combined with Kate's strange human connection to Ember, and channeled through Lyria's love, they created something entirely new. A 3-way bond between mother, guardian, and child, all linked through the dragon. The magic flared bright enough to light up the entire station. Green elven power mixed with human determination and draconic fire. The 3 forces spiraled together, weaving into something that had never existed before. Ember gasped. Her scales brightened. Her breathing steadied. The dragon stood up shakily, looking between Kate and Valendra with wonder. Lyria's eyes snapped open. Color returned to her skin. The crystallization that had been forming reversed itself. She sat up, confused but alive. Kate felt Valendra's presence in her mind. Not invasive, but there. a cool, regal consciousness that she would always be aware of now. And she felt Lyria, bright and warm and full of love. And Ember, fierce and protective and completely loyal. Valendra staggered. She felt Kate's stubborn determination and chaotic emotions. She felt Lyria's simple joy and her daughter's deep love for both her mothers. She felt Ember's animal contentment and protective instincts.